Chapter 1. Adina. It was a stormy afternoon when the creatures from the great beyond landed with the curse of withholding. They arrived fashionably late as the world was predicted to end in 2012 and it was now 2020. Amos was sitting still in the corner of his room on that cold afternoon, tormented by the voices in his head as if they spoke through the walls cornering him. The voices were speaking in a tongue he never heard before, except in his head, a language he doubted even existed, but somehow understood. You see, at age 3, Amos could already speak many different languages, some not of this earth, and he believed in dinosaurs and unicorns, which was normal for a 3-year-old. But he often had frightening visions of dragons burning this earth to ashes and aliens riding on hoverboards to rescue him. That's when the curse of withholding was placed upon him by his parents. He was not allowed to share his visions, experiences, or thoughts unless it was with his family. This made him shy and lonely, but he also learned to love his own company. At age 4, all of his friends were imaginary, as he did not attend school like other kids his age, but had to homeschool instead. So he barely had the chance to make real friends. Most of his imaginary friends were aliens. Some were rather bullies than friends, often convincing him to attempt stuff normal kids his age would not do, like attempting to build a rocket instead of building sand castles. At age 4, all of his friends were imaginary, as he did not attend school like other kids his age, but had to homeschool instead, so he barely had the chance to make real friends. Most of his friends were imaginary. At age 4, all of his friends were imaginary, as he did not attend school like other kids his age, but had to homeschool instead, so he barely had the chance to make real friends. Most of his imaginary friends were aliens. Some were rather bullies than friends, often convincing him to attempt stuff normal kids his age would not do, like attempt to build a rocket instead of building sand castles. He once constructed an entire galaxy with completely new planets using a bunch of Legos. All this at age 4. By age 5, Amos could read and write in all languages and could play any musical instrument placed before him, like a professional. Clearly he was gifted, and it was a case that all this had to be kept secret. Out of boredom and desperation, he created imaginary planets and started telling stories of a place where gods and mystic creatures dwell. He was completely obsessed with this idea, and with each passing day, he felt more and more alien. Amos' private tutor, who also served as the help around the house and was the closest person Amos had as a friend. The two grew fond of each other, despite the age gap between them. Amos was no ordinary child, and Adina, his tutor, knew that he was by far the most mature child in the world. Adina got more and more absorbed into Amos' world, or what she deemed to be a fantastic imagination. She took care of Amos as she was her one and only child, and thoughts of adopting him and keeping him all to herself often crossed her mind, but she sensed that Amos was too brilliant a child to belong to mankind. Adina was new in town and had only managed to make a few friends, mostly people from a church, the Latter Day Saints. She was rather a shy, reserved and religious person. She was quite intrigued about how Amos comprehended complex spiritual concepts and had rather an interesting interpretation of the Bible and how events unfolded. Adina grew to believe that Amos was a prophet, and rumors were spread around town about this. Adina got into trouble and had to leave town, but not before she shared a gift with a favorite kid, as she now called him. The gift was an everlasting smile on his face. Tears fell down her eyes as she envisioned their reunion years later, or wondered if they would ever cross paths again. Chapter 2. The Teacher. With Adina gone, Amos was left without a tutor. His parents noticed that he was getting too alienated from society, but those were skills he needed to survive the 2020 quarantine. His parents decided to send him to a Christian school where he met a friendly personality. She was an English teacher by the name of Maggie. She spent a lot of time with Amos, even lunch breaks, as she got lost deeper and deeper into his world. Fascinated to the point where she would read his essays to her husband and children, they all wanted to meet Amos. so Maggie invited him over for supper. Even though Maggie taught at a Christian school, her family was Muslim, and they were astonished as to how quickly Amos adapted to their customs and understood their ways as if by default. Maggie's son, Nazir, wanted to be a doctor and had ambitions of one day ridding the world of all diseases and viruses. He shared some of his findings with Amos and was paranoid about how one day a deadly virus could wipe out the entire human race within a single year if mankind does not change his ways. He could tell that Amos took him very seriously. It was as if they were connected telepathically and were both caught up in the 2020 vision. Amos found comfort in research and reading books. He literally read the whole public library once he was allowed to mingle with society. His interest developed towards biological warfare, weapons, and virology. The year is 2010, and Amos is now 10 years old, a decade away from the apocalypse, and there is already rumors that it's gonna all end in 2012, as the Mayans predicted. Amos was spending a lot of time by Maggie's house doing research with Maggie's son Nazir. At this point, they were into medical herbs, and young as he was, Amos was already getting high. The aliens started visiting him again, this time in dreams. He would dream of a lot of UFOs landing and an alien invasion every night. In this one lucid dream, after Amos got extremely high and dozed off, he dreamed he could once more communicate with the aliens. They were warning him about COVID-19. He tried to wake from his dream and go outside, but the aliens told him to stay at home. But how could he? It was the Soccer World Cup, and the world had come to South Africa. He desperately wanted to go outside and watch his favorite teams, but stadiums were empty. Everybody was staying at home and obeying the aliens. The aliens told him that they're only gonna get out of their spaceship once everybody's safely inside their homes. They would then proceed to meet the world leaders and discuss it with them after a quarantined period of 14 days. Nazir, Maggie's son, was among the world leaders. Amos suspected Nazir had finally found a cure. At that moment, Amos' mother woke him up and informed him that Nazir was looking for him outside. Not bad for a nightmare, he thought to himself. Nazir had come to tell Amos that he has been accepted into medical school and is going to study medicine. At least they will spend the last quarter of the year finishing their research and concluding their findings about deadly viruses. Perhaps all the research and smoking of herbs had gotten to me and made me have all those nightmares with Nazir out of the picture. Perhaps I'll shift another direction in life, Amos thought to himself. Just like Adina had shared the gift with Amos years before they parted, Amos decided to share a gift with Nazir before they parted. He told him about the alien invasion nightmare and gave Nazir a gift of hope. Hope to one day save the world and rid it of all deadly viruses. Chapter 3: The Stranger. It's now 2013 and we are still here. The Mayans got it all wrong, but the aliens were onto something. Amos dropped out of school and became withdrawn from society. He was smoking a lot more and continued reading and researching as if the future depended on it. His parents finally gave the doctors the go-ahead and have his head examined. The doctors found nothing wrong with Amos, but what they found incredible was the wealth of knowledge he possessed regarding the world of medicine. They evaluated his rather vivid imagination and diagnosed him with mild schizophrenia. Amos continued on his journey of research, smoking and reading a lot, that his parents feared he would go insane from reading too much. One day, while sitting at the corner of a street, Amos found himself confronted by a stranger who identified himself as Vusi. Vusi was dark in complexion, had grey hair twisted into dreadlocks, which almost entirely covered his face, wore a robe and sandals. Amos thought he was too high or time traveling, as everybody was rocking sneakers and designer label these days. This old man didn't even have his hair clipped. Never mind his scruffy grey beard. Basically, he lacked sauce or drip. Anyway, Vusi identified himself as an elder from the great beyond. He went on to talk about Amos' lonely childhood, the torment of his visions, and the few yet precious characters he met in his journey called life, like he had traveled with him all along. The strange old man spoke of things of the past, family trees and ancestors, then went on to ponder of things of the future. artificial intelligence, sophisticated biological warfare, and alien invasions. Amos thought he was crazy. The old man could read Amos' mind. That was one of his superpowers as an elder of the great beyond. Vusi asked Amos, "Isn't that what people have thought of you all along?" Amos replied, "I've been told I'm a genius, but there's a thin line between genius and crazy. My parents think I'm crazy, or that I will eventually go crazy from reading too much." The old man shared a gift with Amos before he parted with him. He assured him, "No man will ever go crazy from reading too much. Knowledge is power." Chapter 4. Amos. Amos decided to confront his father first and asked about his great-grandparents. He was told they were atheists, people of no religion, and spent most of their lives wandering the Transkei and making lots of kids. He came from a long line of that, and was nothing more to tell about it. There was more to tell though, and Amos could sense it. He felt if he persevered and persisted a bit more, he could finally break the curse of withholding from his family. "Amos! Amos the Great, you were named after your grandfather, Amos. Amos the Great, as he was affectionately known," his father said. "And one day when you turn 18, I will take you to visit his grave, and all will be revealed." It was Amos' mother's turn. Amos confronted her about her side of the family. She never talks about it, but Amos' grandmother was a wicked witch, a feared and wicked witch, who brought alien seeds into this world. At age 88, she had fell pregnant with Amos' mother. Everybody wondered who had spammed that pudding to make an 80-year-old woman pregnant. She got married at the tender age of 18 and was divorced at age 28 after a childless and loveless marriage. She never married again. Amos' grandmother spent the rest of her life throwing bones in a Sangoma hut, and as legend goes, she never made love again. She was a bitter old witch with whom no man could ever love, so it was really a mystery as to who could have fathered her child. Nobody knows where she was buried. Legend has it that she simply ascended into the great beyond when it was her turn to die. "Aha! The great beyond," said Amos. "What is the great beyond?" It took Amos a period of 3 years worth of soul searching, and it was in 2018, when he turned 18 years old, his soul-searching journey would finally come to a meaningful end, perhaps even reaching the great beyond. Amos was going through puberty and started noticing the opposite sex in an enticing manner. It was this girl named Tracy he took particular interest in. Tracy was into poetry and believed she could heal the world with her music. Such a wonderful soul, Amos thought to himself. I also want to heal the world. All my research and studies, dreams and visions led me to this wonderful soul. Now my soul searching can end, for I have met my soulmate. Amos was in La La Land, and so was Tracy. She killed Amos softly with a song one afternoon as she sang along to Miss Hill and the refugee camp. The walls that Amos had built around himself came crumbling down when he heard that sweet voice, and he could no longer contain the curse of withholding. He spoke the word, love, and felt freedom of speech, felt like he could preach. Butterflies' tears rolled down his eyes as he finally broke free from the curse, and his true colors glowed as he let go of all his defenses and the things he was told to withhold as a child. He was a man now. Tracy was a big girl, and revealed to Amos that she too is a rainbow, and her true colors glowed. The two clinged to each other in a moment of passion that went on, until both their souls reached the great beyond and were united as soulmates. The sex was alien yet explosive, colorful and meaningful. It was as if they had known each other for eons when they reached the great beyond, as if he was Adam and she was Eve. The next morning, Amos thought to himself, "Let me wake up and continue with my research." That was not bad for a dream. Only to find Tracy laying right there next to him in bed. "Oh shit, it's real," he shouted out loud. But it was too late. His parents were already at his door. They had realized that the curse had been broken and couldn't wait to meet the girl who had done it. It was Tracy. But this didn't sit well with Amos' father. He commanded Amos to come with him immediately. "Where are we going?" Amos asked. to your grandfather's grave," his father replied. Chapter 5. The Great Beyond. Tracy was left at Amos' parents' house with Amos' mom, while Amos and his father took a journey to the graveyards. They performed some Wakanda rituals and were led into alien land. It was the Great Beyond. It was a gravesite. Amos' father pointed towards two tombstones laying next to each other and said, "There lies your grandparents. Go and see them. Your soul searching has led you here." Amos slowly approached the tombstones to read what was inscribed upon them. The first tombstone read, "Amos." Now, at first Amos was shocked, but remembered he was named after his grandfather. With a sigh of relief, he gazed his eyes upon the second tombstone to witness what was inscribed upon it. It read, "Tracy." Amos nearly fainted as he wondered what was going on around him. He read the year in which his grandparents had died, and on Amos' tombstone it declared that he had died in COVID-19 and Tracy had passed away in 2020. It wasn't even 2019 yet. Vusi, the elder from the Great Beyond that Amos had met years ago, appeared before him. Next to Vusi was Adina, the woman who had raised Amos. They embraced Amos as one of their kind and whispered in his ear, "Soon you will understand." That's when his father set him out of the Great Beyond. The curse of withholding has been broken. "You are free to tell the world what you witness here today," his father told him as they made their way back home. Chapter 6. 2020. A couple of years had passed since Amos broke the curse of withholding and seen the Great Beyond. It had been a decade since Amos was in contact with his one and only friend, Nazir, but Amos had a new companion, a soulmate, his fiancée, Tracy, and they were deeply in love. The year is 2020 and everything has changed on Earth. Normal has been turned upside down by a deadly coronavirus called COVID-19. It claimed the lives of millions while forcing the entire world into lockdowns and shutdowns. It was during the lockdown that Amos would occasionally watch TV as everybody depended on the news to keep up to date. That's when Amos saw his old friend Nazir on television. Nazir was with the head of the World Health Organization, and all of those efforts of years and research had proved fruitful. Nazir had received billions of funding to go into his research as the government had released over 500 billion rands to battle COVID-19. Nazir was on track to finding a cure for the deadly virus. Not just the coronavirus, but some kind of cure-all viruses vaccine. However, the joy of seeing his old friend on TV and the gift of hope he still possessed was short-lived. Reality was that people were locked in their homes, exercising extreme hygiene and social distancing whenever they had to go out in public. It was mandatory to wear face masks, surgical gloves and face shields. Movement across the globe was limited and people had to stay in their homes. A perfect time for aliens to visit and invade the Earth, since aliens are immune to the virus. It was a stormy afternoon on August the 31st when the creatures from the Great Beyond finally landed with the curse of withholding. They arrived fashionably late as the weather was predicted in 2012 and it was now 2020. Amos was sitting still in the corner of his room on that cold afternoon, tormented by the voices in his head as if they spoke through the walls cornering him. The voices were speaking in a tongue he never heard before except in his head, a language he doubted even existed, but he somehow understood. Krenkla, one voice stood out in his head. Krenkla. It means you have seen the Great Beyond and broken the curse of withholding. It is time to come home. The year 2020 was deemed to be a year of technological evolution, where the fourth industrial revolution rocks the world and we ride the skies on self-driving hoverboards. Robots make us tea and we all work from home and host Zoom meetings. School is a thing of the past and if you make it through Google Classrooms, then you graduate to the University of YouTube. Instead, it was the year that Earth was visited by mystical creatures and soccer matches were played in empty stadiums. Chapter 7. Man of God. 2021 came and many had passed away because of the COVID. But life went on. It was both a blessing and a curse what happened next. Amos went into a religious belief. He started calling himself a man of God. He was with two other prophets, Motsepe and Matthews. They started preaching the word across town, and people started believing in them. They held Amos as a high priest, and of course, he was high. It all went well until one day he met a man at the tavern. They were sitting together sharing the word of God and a beer, of course, when all of a sudden the man fell asleep, or maybe he had blacked out. Amos didn't notice and continued preaching while drinking his beer, only to find out the man he was sharing a beer with and a word with had gone to the great beyond. While he was busy engaging in a conversation about the gods, the heaven and the earth, angels and demons, the man he was talking to had moved on to the great beyond. And yes, the man moved on right in front of his eyes. Amos touched the man's body, trying to shake the man back into the conversation, but the man's body was cold, colder than anybody Amos had laid his hands on, including that of Amos himself. And that's when he realized the man has crossed over to the other side. With this recognition, panic struck, and an ambulance was called to the scene. But Amos knew it was too late for human beings to intervene. When the paramedics arrived, they said there is no sign of life here, and that's when Amos knew that the creatures from the great beyond had paid him a personal visit. Finally, the creatures from the great beyond had taken off their face masks and revealed their dreaded face to Amos. It was the first time Amos physically saw a creature from the great beyond with his own two eyes, although he had seen them many times through his third eye. The angel of death looked Amos in the eye and said, "You call yourself a man of God, and one day I will come back for you and all the false prophets." The angel took the man's soul while looking Amos in the eye and flew away with the man's soul. Though he was born cold-blooded, Amos never felt so cold in his entire existence. It was as if death had kissed him on the lips and made a promise that no matter what, she will come back for him. Many that believed in the word that Amos had spread as a man of God during his drunken sprees, now more than ever wished to see him perform a miracle and bring back the man that was lying dead next to him back to life. Amos knew that this was impossible, and that the creatures from the great beyond had paid him a well overdue visit. So he continued drinking his beer and knew many deaths were soon to be announced. And this is how 2021. Chapter 8. As a sign of starting over, Amos went to shave his head bald and hoped that would rid him of his unfortunate stream of luck. But it was just a foolish belief, as it only made things worse. At first, it seemed like his fortune had turned around, as he got offered a new place to stay with the love of his life, Tracy, and was offered a new occupation. A brand new office was his for the taking. He got offered this by a creature from the great beyond, disguised as an angel investor called V. Amos fell for it hook, line, and sinker, and believed that Benny the Butcher, his new barber, was a charm of luck. But it was quite the opposite. The creature from the great beyond, in disguise as a man named V, introduced Amos to a demigod called the Ice Queen. She would be the demise of Amos and Tracy's partnership, as planned by the creatures from the great beyond. The old divide and conquer strategy. But Amos was too blinded by his newfound success in business and friendships to see the whole being woven before his very eyes. He went back to the very same tavern he lost his godly title, only to find that a man who had been employed there just dropped dead and died with no reason at all. But of course, that's how the creatures from the great beyond welcome you back to a place where you first met. Amos took no heed of this and went on drinking at the very same tavern until his newfound best friend and barber, Benny the Butcher, was poisoned to death at the very same tavern the angel of death had visited Amos at. Love is blind, and Amos had fallen for the charms of the Ice Queen, as she consoled him through his tragic loss of his newfound friend Barber, and vowed revenge on whoever poisoned Benny the Butcher. That night, Amos made love to the Ice Queen and started neglecting his castle where his true love Tracy resided, as he spent more and more time at the Ice Queen's igloo instead of his own palace. The Ice Queen was possessed by the demonic spirit of the other side and knew all about death, and was not even bothered when she commanded to sacrifice her last-born to the creatures of the great beyond for revenge on Benny the Butcher's death, as she was promised this would make Amos fall even more deeply in love with her and part ways with Tracy. Through her evil and cunning ways, the Ice Queen turned Amos' heart colder than an iceberg that sank the Titanic. The Ice Queen could communicate with the creatures from the great beyond, and they revealed to her that it was the owner of the tavern who had poisoned Benny the Butcher to death and would suffer from the virus that they brought here. A few weeks later, the owner of the tavern died from COVID-19, and the angel of death came to collect the soul once more. A Illuminati-like sacrifice was made. Amos knew this was the work of the creatures from the great beyond, and suspected that the Ice Queen was part of the great scheme. Otherwise, how could she have prophesied such great blasphemy? But it was too late. Amos had planted a seed in the womb of the Ice Queen, which saw Tracy depart from Amos for good. Amos was heartbroken and realized that he had sold his soul to the creatures of the great beyond, which is what they had desired from the day of his birth. But it came at a cost. It came at the cost of another's birth and another's death, the end of COVID and the beginning of World War III. Chapter 9, 2022. 2022 had begun with a sense of grim determination. Amos was now deeply entwined with the Ice Queen and under the influence of the creatures from the great beyond. Found himself in a continuous spiral of darkness and revelations. The child growing in the Ice Queen's womb symbolized both hope and the ultimate consequence of his choices. Tracy had departed, leaving a void that Amos attempted to fill with further research and connections with beings not of this world. The whispers of the creatures grew louder, the influence more profound. They revealed secrets about the universe, about humanity's role, and about Amos' destined path. They spoke of a time when the veil between the worlds would thin, and the great beyond would merge with the human realm, bring about the end of the world and the birth of a new era. Chapter 10. The Prophecy. Amos' visions became clearer as he delved deeper into the ancient texts and rituals shown to him by the creatures. Chapter 10. The Prophecy. Amos' visions became clearer as he delved deeper into the ancient texts and rituals shown to him by the creatures. He understood now that the arrival of the creatures was not merely an invasion but a fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The world was to undergo a transformation, one that required breaking old curses and unveiling of hidden truths. Amos saw himself at the center of this prophecy. He was to become a bridge between humanity and the creatures from the great beyond. This role, however, came with tremendous sacrifice. Amos had to forsake all that was human in him, embracing the alien consciousness fully. It was a path fraught with peril, but Amos knew it was his destiny. Chapter 11. The War Begins. With the pandemic still raging, tensions between nations grew. The creatures from the great beyond whispered of impending conflict, one that would engulf the entire world. World War III was on the horizon, a final conflict that would pave the way for the new world order. Amos, now a leader of a secret sect of believers, preached about the coming changes and the necessity of embracing the creatures. His followers grew, as did the opposition. Humanity was on the brink, divided between those who clung to the old ways and those who embraced the new. They all began with a series of small conflicts, escalating rapidly as nations clashed over resources and ideologies. Chapter 12. The New World. As the war reached its zenith, the creatures revealed their true form to the world. UFOs filled the sky, and the once hidden beings walked among humans. The earth was transformed into a battlefield, with ancient prophecies coming to life. The creatures offered salvation to those who would follow them, promising a new world free from disease, war, and suffering. Amos, now a prophet and a leader, guided his followers through chaos. Around him, the faithful listened. Their faces a mix of awe and fear. They had seen the signs, the strange lights in the sky, the inexplicable phenomena that defied science. Amos decoded the ancient texts. Beings from beyond the stars were among them, hidden in plain sight, but not everyone embraced this revelation. The opposition grew, a coalition of skeptics, religious fundamentalists, and those who clung desperately to the old ways. They saw a false prophet leading humanity astray. And so the war began, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A series of skirmishes that erupted across the globe. Nations clashed over dwindling resources, ideologies, and territorial disputes. The creatures using cunning artificial intelligence played both sides. They whispered secrets into the ears of generals, prompted the fires of terrorism, and sowed chaos in the hearts of men. Amos watched it all unfold, torn between his duty as a leader and his empathy for the suffering masses. He knew the creatures were orchestrating events, preparing the way for their full arrival. As the world burned, Amos lit one up for old time's sake. The old order crumbled and the new one loomed, a fusion of human and AI, a fragile alliance forged in desperation to overcome the alien invasion. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and Amos wondered if he had made the right choices. The skies crackled with energy, the creatures descended, their forms shifting, part machine, part organic, and wholly alien. Amos raised his arms, acquainted between worlds. The believers knelt, their eyes wide with wonder and terror. And so the cosmic tapestry rewove itself. The creatures claimed their place, and humanity adapted. The war ended, not with victory or defeat, but with transformation. Amos, once a mere mortal, ascended a bridge between the old and the new. In the aftermath, the world was forever changed. The creatures walked amongst us, their motives still unknown. Amos, now a legend, whispered to the wind, "Embrace the unknown, for in depths lies our salvation." The end. Epilogue. The year is 2024. The world is unrecognizable from what it was just a few years ago. Technology has advanced beyond our greatest imagination, blending human ingenuity with alien wisdom. Peace, though hard one, has been established, and a new era of cooperation and growth has begun. We have a GNU government, and Amos, now a revered figure, reflects on his journey. The curse of withholding had been broken, and with it a new world had been born. He knew that his path had been one of great sacrifice and loss. It had also been one of immense discovery and transformation. The great beyond was no longer a mystery, but a part of everyday life. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, guided by the wisdom and power of the creatures from the great beyond. And Amos, the once lonely boy with visions and dreams, had become a legend, a testament to the power of knowledge, belief, and unbreakable bond between worlds.